want to talk to you a little bit about David in Scripture. King David. He's someone who it's easy to get confused about because he's called a man after God's own heart, and yet he did some of the worst things that anyone has ever done in Scripture. And, he did as cruel and evil things as probably just about anyone could ever do. And yet he's called a man after God's own heart. And we could talk about that more another time in terms of why he's called a man after God's own heart. I guess I have talked about it once in a podcast, and I'll just say at this point that we look at that and we say, how could he be a man after God's own heart? Because we always want to keep score. And we think that that is how God determines whether or not we're interested in him or love him or care about him. And what I mean by that is if our scorecard looks good and we've had a lot of success in not sinning, we're not sinning a lot, and we're doing well on the moral scale, then our assumption is that God would naturally just say, of course, that's a man or a woman after my own heart. And that is part of it. I mean, how we live is a response to what's going on in our heart, and maybe how much we love God. Yeah, that is part of it. But a man after God's own heart is a statement more of God just saying, regardless of behavior or how good or bad the person has been, it's more of a statement of, this is a person who really does love me. And regardless of what they do or have done, I know without a doubt that they long to have a relationship with me. And they really are trying to love me and trying to get things together in their life. I know it may not look like it based on what they've done here and there, but I know without a doubt that this is a person who wakes up in the morning and goes to bed at night with an honest desire to love me and do the right thing. And that's a person after my own heart, regardless of what sin or sins that they've committed. Okay, so enough about that, but I'm just saying that David can be a confusing figure because of all the terrible things that he did do in his life. However, he is somebody who really, really, truly did love God. I want to read you a small passage of Scripture that just shows one of the ways that David's heart was sensitive. The book of Psalm, chapter 70. It says in verse 2, "May those who want to take my life be put to shame and confusion." Okay, so we look at that and we say, that sounds like what I know of David. If someone wants to take his life, which many, many people did. He was the king of Israel, and that's just what happened in those days when you were the king of a country. There were a lot of people that were after your life. So we say, okay, that sounds exactly what I would think David would say. If somebody wants to kill me, may they feel shame and confusion, because that's what they deserve. So God, get them. And he goes on, he says, "May all who desire my ruin be turned back in disgrace." That's an interesting phrase. He says, be turned back. So, again, recapping, he says, For all of those people that want to take my life, may they be put to shame. And may they feel confusion instead of certainty for what may they feel confused about their actions toward me. And may they turn back because of the disgrace that they feel. Turn back to what? I'll talk about that in a moment. We go on in verse 3, and it says, may those who say to me, aha, aha, turn back because of their shame. Now the words aha, aha, it's just like it sounds, or I mean it's just AHA exclamation point, AHA exclamation point. When we say that in our modern vernacular, it's more like discovering something. Like if we're looking for a pair of shoes that we can't find, we look in one, the closet, and we just can't find it, and then we think, oh man, what did I leave it in another room of the house? And we go and we look in another room, and we look in odd places like underneath the couch, or just weird, like who knows why, but we look everywhere, and finally we find them and we go, aha, there are my shoes. Well, that's not how, in the Hebrew language, thousands of years ago, that's not what aha meant. Aha, if we literally look it up in the Hebrew language, that word, or the way of using that expression, was saying, may you go to a very warm, hot place. Are you getting my drift? I mean, that's literally what it means. Or another way of saying it literally is as though you were saying, may you boil in oil. But may you go to a very hot place where it's very warm. Really what they were saying in their way of expressing themselves that day in anger toward another person is they were basically saying, like we would say, or some people would say today, may you go to, and that's what they were saying. And so it wasn't like, aha, I found my shoes. Somehow, I don't know what it sounded like, but it was more of a scornful, very mean way. I don't know what it would have sounded like. Aha, aha, I don't know. But it's a way of verbally slapping someone in the face, degrading them, and saying, may you go to a very warm place, buddy. And the sooner the better. Now, that being said, I want to read this back to you. It's in Psalm chapter 90, verse 2. David says, may those who want to take my life be put to shame and confusion. Okay, so if they want to take his life, may they feel shame for that, and may they be confused instead of just, without a doubt, feeling that it's certainly the right thing to do to take his life. May they be confused now about what they're doing and think, maybe it's not a good idea for me to do this, and maybe I should feel ashamed about it. It goes on, he says, may all who desire my ruin be turned back in disgrace. Again, be turned back to what? I believe he means be turned back relationally to him. May they realize what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're acting, and may that relationship be restored. I think he's talking about people that knew him personally, that had a relationship with him, that loved him at one point, and now they've turned on him, and they're actually saying, aha, aha, as if to mean, may you, David, even though we formerly were friends, may you go to a very warm, hot place. Aha, aha. But David is saying, may they be turned back toward me so that we can have a relationship again, so that we could be friends again, so that this could be put behind us. That is the sensitive side of David. When people were literally wanting to kill him, as they would do in that day when one was king. And even when people who used to love him and used to care about him have knifed him in the back, so to speak, relationally, and they're saying, may you go to a very warm place. Even then, David isn't willing to write off the relationship, but he's saying, oh God, would you do something in their heart? Cause them to feel guilt and shame for their response toward me. Not just so that they'll feel guilt and shame and I'll be able to say, yeah, you got what you deserve. That's not what I'm after, God. I'm after restoration. I want them to come back to me relationally so that we can make things right. That's why I'm asking you to make them feel guilt, shame, and confusion so that we can be restored. Wow, now that's a great way to live. Is there someone in your life that has wronged you, that's harmed you, that's hurt you? And it's especially hard when they've been close to you before, or they're family members, or they're people who just should get it and should never act that way. Are there people in your life that have done something mean, awful to you? And maybe they've even basically said, may you go to a very warm place. A person after God's own heart, a person who really cares about relationships and a relationship with God, is somebody who says, God, I'm going to ask that you would help their heart to change, not so I can prove that I was right, but just so that we can restore this relationship. May they turn back to me, because I'm already turning toward them, so that we can make this right. Think about it. Is there somebody that you could pray, not that God will get them, but that God will change them so that you can be restored? If this podcast has been helpful for you and you haven't already subscribed, just go to the subscribe button that you'll see on the page and subscribe. That way you'll make sure that you get everything that I put on the podcast the moment that it's available. And if it's helpful for you, it probably would be helpful for someone that you know as well. If you could send them a link or tell them about the podcast, and then also comment on the particular podcast wherever you're at online. Make a comment, rate it if you will, and that will help others to be able to see and hear about the podcast as well. So thank you so much for listening.